I'm Ernie Humphrey, Educational Programs Leader for Performative, the largest online community for corporate finance, accounting, treasury, and related professionals. I'd like to welcome everyone to today's webinar, T&E Expenses, Leveraging Technology to Establish Visibility and Control. T&E expense management is a top concern for companies in terms of internal risk management in addition to being a significant area of expense. Current advances in technology and processes are allowing companies to not only manage T&E expenses more effectively, but to do so in an environment of better controls. Today, our speakers will offer us an overview of T&E best practices, a review of current and emerging technologies in the arena of T&E expense management, and we will hear from a company on the forefront of leveraging technology and managing T&E expenses across the enterprise. I would like to thank Certify, whose commitment to thought leadership helps us make this webinar possible and delivered at no cost. A quick note on today's agenda. First, we'll hear a joint presentation from our featured speakers. They'll move to the interactive Q&A session where we'll spend the remainder of our hour. We would like this to be an interactive experience for you. So if you have any questions at any time, please go to the questions area and you go to our control panel and send us your questions. We can't promise to get all of them in, but we do our best, and we'll follow up afterwards any questions we do not get to today. A few logistical notes about today's webinar. Links to today's presentation and video recording of the webinar will be sent out to all attendees within 24 hours of the event. Those who would like CPE credits will need to answer all polling questions during the event and should have pre-registered for CPE credit. For any questions on CPE credits, please send an email to cpe@performative.com. Attendees who qualify for CPE credit will receive a CPE certificate via email within 24 to 48 hours of the event. Again, we encourage you to ask questions on today's topic via the questions box and you go to our control panel at any time during the webinar. Finally, we ask to take a short survey immediately following the webinar. We greatly appreciate your feedback regarding our event today, as we always strive to improve the ROI we offer our event attendees for their valuable time. A quick word about Performative. Performative is the largest online community resource for senior level corporate finance, accounting, treasury, and related leaders. Performative connects corporate finance leaders to provide instant advice and insights on the tough financial and strategic challenges that they face every day. It is now my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Bob Neveu. In 2008, Bob launched Certify as his second software startup in Portland. Certify's venture-backed team has accelerated the growth of the business to where they are now considered the second largest provider in North America of expense reporting software with multinational customers including Bristol-Myers Squibb, Subway Sandwiches, and Virgin Galactic. Certify has gained the attention of many major publications for its innovative technology, including the recent release of auto-generated expense reporting with Certify Report Executive, featured in the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, and CNN Money. With that, it is my distinct pleasure to hand the floor over to Bob. Bob, you now have the floor. Please go ahead and take it away. Thank you very much.
Great. Well, thank you, Ernie, for teeing up the webinar, and thank you, everyone, for joining us today here on our webinar. Hopefully, this will be a useful 1 hour of your time. And as Ernie did indicate, we will have a time for questions and answers towards the end of this call. So please keep those questions in mind as we go, and we'll get to them at the end. So just a quick slide about Certify. We're an online travel and expense management software provider. And we do have sort of cloud-based solutions that are truly a hosted environment with mobile technology to capture receipts and expenses and approve and submit expense reports on the go. As you'll see in the image here, you've got sort of PC-based or Mac or cloud-based, browser-based software with mobile technology to support it. We started the business back in 2008, and since then we've grown to a large number of transactions with over 15 million transactions passing through our network in 2013, with truly billions of dollars of expense reports and expenses being processed. And we have clients globally, primarily here in North America, but we do have a global footprint as well with the product available in 64 languages. And we service small customers as well as large sort of Fortune 500s with some of the logos you see on the screen there. The point really I'm trying to make is that we're an established firm, and we're going to look at some of the data and some of the metrics that we've seen and learned from our business and from our users, as well as some industry data, and share that with you today to try to help you get a better understanding of the travel and expense management space and how your company can automate services and save a lot of money in the process. So T&E expense management trends. So let's just talk about what's happening in the space today. You know, travel and expense actually accounts for typically between 10 to 12% of the total annual budget for most companies. So if you actually look down the P&L and you say, where are we spending our money, T&E adds up quite quickly. And when any item has that much of the spend capture, you know, 10 to 12% in the P&L, you need to manage it. You need to take a look at it and say, can we do better? Can we reduce this? Can we be more efficient? T&E spend is increasing. So in 2013, 58% of the companies increased their T&E spend over 2012. And the forecast for 2014 is that we'll see T&E trends continue to spend more over 2013. Typically, those increases overall are in the sort of 3.5 to 4.5% range. So they, sort of keeping pace with inflation, but it is an increase in spend. And I guess the message that we're trying to say is T&E spending is not decreasing; it's increasing. So as it increases, you need to find creative ways and fiscal ways to actually manage that and drive those costs down to a certain degree. And when you look at the number of companies that are switching to some type of automated system, 52% of them are saying the number one reason to switch is so they can reduce expense processing costs. So not the actual cost to stay in a hotel or a rental car or airfare. Certainly we all want to try to reduce those. But the actual processing cost and processing time of expense reports adds up quite quickly. So this is an area that companies want to try to find some more efficiencies in, and it's definitely one of the trends that we see in the space today. So in looking at the landscape out there, we sort of segment between SMB, small to medium businesses versus enterprise companies. And if you look at the numbers, they're quite different. Basically, how do organizations currently manage travel and expense reporting? And when asking that question to SMBs and enterprise, we see a lot of different answers. The first category here, pen and paper, 11% of the SMBs are still using pen and paper, believe it or not, truly, where it's a paper form and you fill it out. The more sort of, I think we see in a greater percentage, companies using Excel spreadsheets with receipts attached, and I think that's pretty standard. If you look at that data, you see 68% of the small and medium-sized businesses in North America are using either paper or spreadsheets to manage expense reports. And when you look at the enterprise companies, you still see sort of 22% of companies using Excel and paper, and then another 22% using ERP systems. And ERP systems can certainly be effective, but a lot of times it's really a single platform play may not necessarily be the best in breed. You might be lacking some key features from an ERP product that you would see in a cloud-based, web-based solution. Typically, a lot of ERP providers, we see that they don't have mobile technology handled yet, and they're still sort of developing that. So, when you look at companies and how they're currently managing travel and expense reporting, the vast majority in the SMB world are still on Excel and paper, and a large percentage of enterprise are still there as well. So my message to you is this: if you're using Excel and paper methods today, don't fret. You're still part of the majority in many cases, and lots of folks are looking to automate that process. So the next slide here, the question was sort of asked, within the next 2 years, how do your organizations expect to manage travel and expense? And the various options here, pen and paper, Excel spreadsheets, homegrown systems, so maybe a Microsoft Access database or some internally built product, cloud or web-based solutions versus ERP. And it's really not surprising to see such large percentages of companies looking to move to the cloud. I think this is true in expense management, but I think, as you all know, in your own business, this is probably true in many of the areas of your business, whether it's an ERP product in the cloud, or whether it's payroll, or whether it's even physical systems, telephone systems, networking, hardware, software, servers. It's all moving to the cloud. And I think that the anticipation to migrate to cloud-based T&E services is really in line and parallel with the general shift to the cloud we see in a lot of business areas. However, the move to the cloud with mobile technology does bring some specific unique opportunities for companies to really help their employees and their travelers manage data on the go through mobile phones, and we'll talk about that. Why would people switch to the cloud-based product? The single most important item here is to simplify the expense reporting process. So, when you look at people using Excel and paper or homegrown systems or even ERP systems, there's a tremendous amount of time spent entering data and capturing data and typing in data and rekeying data from the employee's perspective, from the manager's perspective, from the accounting team's perspective. There's really a lot of steps in the process that require data entry, and simplifying that process is a key driver for the switch to the cloud. Some of the other drivers here provide an expense system accessible from anywhere. Certainly, a global mobile online solution is critical to 42% of the people that responded to this. improve employee compliance rates to corporate travel policies. So, a lot of the companies that come to certify, they have a corporate, T&E policy, but they have a very hard time implementing that in an Excel spreadsheet world. So, looking to get improvement on those compliance rates, driving down some of those costs and managing those, that's a critical factor for about a third of the customers. Reimbursing employees faster, this is kind of interesting. If you ask the CFOs and controllers that are my customers, that was only, 1 out of 4 were really concerned about reimbursing employees faster. But if you ask the employees what their number one concern is with the new expense system, this is the issue. How soon will I get paid? And when you think about employee satisfaction, employee and user adoption rates, this is a key driver to get the employees to start using the system. They'll get paid faster, and we hear it time and time again. And then bringing multiple systems together, HR systems into one system with HR, finance, et cetera. Connectivity between cloud systems is generally an easier thing to do than trying to connect multiple systems or spreadsheets. So that is a driving force, but it's lesser of importance. The key one is always we've seen is the expense reporting process and simplifying that for employees and managers. So in also surveying some of the folks, talking about the top strategies organizations use to improve travel and expense programs. So really looking at the breakdown here, automate key components of T&E expense management. So some of those key components are around the submission process and the timing process, especially when you start to bring in a corporate credit card. As companies implement corporate credit cards, a lot of times they're seen as sort of a potential solution to a T&E problem. And the corporate card can actually cause a lot of its own extra challenges with regards to reconciliation and payments and timings of those. So, bringing in an automated T&E system can help bring all of that in line so that you're able to get the efficiencies of a corporate card and the spend management, but you're also getting the reconciliation and payments either submitted to the employees or paid to the card company on behalf of the employees on a timely basis. To measure and improve and enforce corporate T&E policies, that's a big area. You can have a policy, but if you're not enforcing it and you're not measuring it, it really becomes meaningless. It becomes something that people sort of shoot for, but they're not actually held to it. We've actually seen some companies go to the extent where they will look at, from a employee performance perspective, when you do your sort of year-end or quarterly performance reviews, we've seen some of our clients actually come to the T&E product and say, how often has this individual broken the travel policy? And if they've violated travel policy rules more than X number of times, it becomes a performance review issue. So it really is all about improvement and trying to get employees to be aware of the spending rules and guidelines, and then actually embracing those and endorsing those. The better technology to travelers and executives, again, CFOs and controllers are generally concerned with that, but the employees are the recipients and the benefactors of it. So the employees are really normally very happy to see a mobile app, the ability to track and manage their spend and see where their money's at and when they're getting paid and reimbursed. That's a key driver for utilization rates. And then leveraging analytics. It's funny when we see a new customer join us, they start out with a lot of other goals other than analytics. But sort of once they've been using the product 90 days, 180 days, they start to understand the analytics and can see access and patterns in their data which they had not seen prior. And that's really when it becomes quite compelling, when people start to optimize their spend patterns and their spend policies. Even though you have one policy for the company, it can include many tiers where maybe salespeople have one rule and managers have another rule and executives have a different policy, and trying to optimize those policies across the board. The analytics that come into play there are really key. So you can see not only how is it going for your organization, but from a benchmark perspective, what are other companies doing and what other trends in the space should you watch? So those are some of the areas that we see as some of the top strategies to improve T&E. Just briefly here, we call it the technology showdown. If you look at manual versus web-based, this is I think a great slide. If you're looking to build up sort of an internal benefits or ROI document around why you would want to consider a review of web-based expense vendors. On the left-hand side is when we say manual, that means sort of paper-based / Excel spreadsheet-based, and web-based, of course, is an online system like Certify. In the manual world, it's typically about $41 per expense report for an employee to create it, the manager to review it and approve it, for accounting to process it and pay it the reimbursement. It's about $41 in human costs, whereas moving to a web-based solution on the right, it's about $7.17. And again, this is as per the Aberdeen Group and their the data that they collected in their survey. As you continue down the list, 19 days to reimburse in a manual world, 7 days in a web-based world. So the employees are more satisfied. The company has better management over cash. You can see what to do and when it's due, and you have better visibility into those costs. 50% compliance to T&E policy versus 87%. So imagine that. If you can pick up 37% in compliance, you're going to reduce costs just across the board. You're going to spend less. Your employees are going to spend less on travel, and that's a good thing. Visibility into spend of only 30% in the manual world versus 61%. And then the documentation of approval paths, 88% in a web-based world versus 62%. So, when you look at an expense report from an audit perspective, did the right signatures get approved? Did it get sent to the proper people? Did it have the proper authorizations before it was paid? That's a critical function, and I'm sure many of you on the call are aware of that, and how at year end that can become one of those challenges. So having that in a web-based world to make it very, very clear that all the right approvals have been attached to an expense report prior to payment is another key driver. So let's just jump forward here. Technology and expense report management. So what are some of those key areas? Being able to integrate multiple systems into one platform is critical. Enforcing corporate travel policies and expense policies, we've talked about it. That's another key area. The insight into spending, again, really important to customers, typically after they've gone live. And then the last bullet item here, it's kind of interesting, increasing the frequency of reports. We hear customers say, our employees do expense reports monthly, or we'll just let them submit it when they need to. And, it's really not a great policy or a procedure for a number of reasons. And what happens is that we've heard from some companies where it comes to year end and they end up with a huge amount of expense reports that all come in, in the last week of December because they haven't required people to send in expense reports. And so you end up with this big lumpy sort of expense that comes in. You end up with an extra $100,000 in T&E, booked in December that you hadn't planned for instance. Nobody likes that. The GAAP rules don't like that. We like to try to keep our expenses in the proper sequence of when they occur. So, trying to have people do a monthly report is good. But even if you look at a monthly report, if let's say it's the 5th of the month and I'm doing my report for the prior month, and I've got a lunch that's 30 days old, a receipt for lunch, the IRS requires me to indicate who are the meal attendees. And if I can't remember who the meal attendees were and what the relationships were with those folks, I start to have some real questions about, is that a reimbursable expense, or is that just myself going to lunch? And so having expense reports being more frequent gets you as a company, more accurate data. You get a faster insight into the expenses. You know what's coming through. You don't have big surprises and shocks at the end of the month, the end of the quarter. And it's really a good practice to have employees doing expense reports sooner than later, or at least capturing the data in a system so that it's held. So when they go to submit their report in 30 days, they've already entered what that data was. It's already on file. Integration for multiple systems, chatted about this briefly. I mean, typically a lot of folks are trying to integrate their financial platforms. Expense is going to require both financial integration as well as typical HR integration. So you need to know who the users are, the workflow. Policies are going to be built into the system, but they could be driven from ERP products. And then sending data out, from cloud-based solutions into the financial products to say, okay, how much did we spend on air and hotel and car, and by which business unit and which cost center? And it can be a very straightforward process, or sometimes it can be very complicated. It's not atypical for us to see a company that may have grown through acquisition, and the customer may have 3, 4, 5 different accounting packages that they have not consolidated, and they need to have different data feeds based on business unit or location or cost center or geocoding or some other variables. And being able to get that data out to those systems so that the company can roll up and manage their financials is critical. And in doing this, you're really eliminating the manual data entry. If right now, if you're managing multiple systems or even one system, and you've got employees submitting expense reports on Excel and paper, it's a lot of data entry. Somebody in the accounting team is having to either chop up a lot of spreadsheets and merge it all together, or they're actually putting that data in manually. And then reconciliation of that data is critical, right? It's got to add up, and making sure that you have all the what's been approved, what's been disapproved, how much has been reimbursed, and keeping track of all those balances. And integrating that to the AP reports, but also the corporate credit cards. Corporate credit cards are great tools, but again, your accounting team is going to want to reconcile that. They're going to need to say, for instance, they just received the statement from your credit card provider, and you owe $100,000 in T&E for the month, and you need to go into a system and say, okay, where's that T&E at? How much of it's been approved? How much has been disapproved? How much is employee spend that's personal? What percentage of it is over policy? You're going to feel a lot more comfortable sending that $100,000 check for reimbursement, knowing where that amount is at and where it's in the process from an approval standpoint. Okay, making the connection, manual versus automation. So which systems are organizations currently integrating with? And I think really the message across the board is that web-based expense systems versus a manual expense process, it's much easier to integrate with. I mean, integrating with Excel spreadsheets is not terribly simple. It can be very frustrating, and there's a lot of labor involved. And in almost all cases, corporate credit cards, general ledger systems, accounts payable systems, and HRIS, they're connecting with web-based systems in a much greater percentage than you would with an Excel spreadsheet environment. And then looking at policy enforcement, it's really interesting to look at the integrating the corporate travel and expense policies and enforcing policies either before the expense occurs or as the employee submits the expense. So, for instance, enforcing policies before the expense occurs is critical. So when you look at travel spend, there's a lot of companies that still today will say, look, there's online travel booking tools. You can use the online travel agencies such as Expedia, Orbitz, Travelocity. You know, you can direct book with the airfare, with the with airlines, with the hotels. The problem with those environments is that you do not have the ability to really reduce the spend before it occurs, but using a travel booking tool allows you to present airfares, hotel rates and rental car rates that are within the user's compliance of purchase. So, I mean, literally, when you think about reimbursing an airfare, you have an employee that submits a receipt on a spreadsheet that says they spent $500 for a trip from New York to Chicago, and they bought it on Expedia. And you say, okay, they've sent in the paperwork. I own $500. The question you should be asking yourself is, how do I know that $500 airfare was the cheapest airfare available that day? There's no way for you to know. If they bought it outside of the system, you've basically lost control of that the spend control before it occurs. So you really want to think about bringing some of those tools into play, especially if your spend on travel is sort of $1 million a year and more between air, hotel, and car. If it is, you can be seeing some significant discounts and savings and compliance control pieces. Having the system automatically check and analyze data, checking for out-of-policy expenses is great, but also for checking for duplicates, checking for missing receipts, checking for missing supporting data, so meals with attendees and relationships. Looking at things like where, potentially expense employees, maybe you have 1 or 2 employees that are submitting expenses to a particular person that's within the approval hierarchy, but every time it goes to that person, they also happen to be out of compliance, and that person continues to approve them out of compliance. And maybe that's something you want to know about. You want to take a look a little closer. Organizations utilizing web-based expense systems have a 37% higher rate of compliance to corporate travel policy. So by putting these tools in place, people do comply, and it's really critical to understand that in your current, if you're using Excel and paper in that environment, it's very, very hard to get corporate compliance with the travel policy. The other thing I will tell you that and it's really not on this slide, is behavior modification. It's not that anyone's doing a bad job or trying to beat the system or pad expense reports, but the truth of the matter is when you put a system in place, people spend less because they modify their behavior knowing that the system is in place and keeping track of things. It's just a natural phenomenon. We see it in almost every instance when a customer starts using Certify, that behavior modification occurs. And so keep that in mind as one of the potential benefits from using a product that's going to automate expenses. So briefly here, gaining insight into spend with reporting and analytics capability. One system to track all your employees in the reporting, on-demand reporting on items such as spend by employee, spend by category, spend by vendor, pending approvals, etc. That's really a great example. You know, you finish a quarter, you look at the end of the fiscal year, you want to know, do you have any big expenses that are out there that haven't been paid for that need to be booked to the balance sheet as an accrual? And you can look into a system like Certify and say, what do I have out there? Maybe it's December 31, and in January and February, it's a busy part of the year for you folks for travel. Maybe there's some conferences, maybe there's some sales events that are coming up, and everyone's already pre-booked travel, and you've got some big expenses coming in January, and they've already got it sitting out there as flights and airfare, hotel, and rental car reservations. You can look into a system and see that and say, you know what, I better put $100,000 on the balance sheet to try to true this up and accrue for this amount of money, or even more if it's a bigger number than 100 grand. So having that kind of visibility into the spend is really critical. One other piece here, increasing frequency. So I mentioned this before. With an internet-based accessibility system, it's really very fast to complete an expense report. And in fact, in Certify, we've actually automated that entire process. So the employee actually has the expense report built for them instantly and automatically. They get an email that says, Bob, your expense report's done. All I have to do is log in, review it, and submit it. So when it's doing the work for me, I should be doing it more frequently. And the reason I'm going to do that, as I mentioned before, you're going to get better data, you're going to get more accurate data, more timely insight to spend, and the ability to correct someone if they are spending too much or don't understand the travel policy. You're able to really bring them back in line. This is the next slide, CFO's answer. What did we see when asking basically that same question? What are the most important features when looking for selecting a T&E vendor? 53% looking for mobile applications and business accessibility while traveling. Expense management automation. This word automation is loosely used to make sure that you're looking at systems that actually automate the process for you. Importing a credit card statement is not a big level of automation. I mean, there's been a lot of companies doing that for years. You want to find a system that actually can save the employee time and the manager time and actually building and reviewing and submitting and approving expense reports. Systems integration and reporting insight into spend as well. I know everyone would like to move forward here and have Glenn and listen to Glenn and his experience in implementing a T&E system. I have a couple slides here, but I think I'm going to just sort of jump through these fairly quickly. This will be provided to you, of course, after the presentation. If you're looking at expense management vendors, here's 10 things that you should be considering as part of your sort of vendor selection checklist. So I'll let you look at these in a follow-up mode. But the last one I just want to summarize for me is 54% of the companies intend to move to a web-based expense system within the next 2 years. So if you're thinking about this, know that you're in the majority. It's a natural migration that a lot of people are doing. The companies who switch to web-based systems tend to experience a higher rate to corporate compliance, increased visibility into spend, and reducing reimbursement times by over 50%. And then, the top two features are mobility and automation, and those are really the summaries that I want to present here. So I'm going to go ahead and hand this off to Glenn and Ernie. Thanks, everyone, for your time up to this point.
Okay, thank you very much, Bob, for that great content. It's my distinct pleasure to welcome our next speaker, Glenn Foster. Glenn currently serves as Vice President of International Finance Administration for Zoll Medical Corporation out of Columbus, Massachusetts, where he has served since 2003. Prior to his current role, Glenn serves as International Controller for Zoll Medical Corporation for 12 years. Glenn is a certified management accountant since 1992, as well as a licensed CPA since 1985. Prior to working at Zoll Medical, he has worked at the Boston Scientific Corporation as well as Ernst & Young. Glenn studied at the University of Maine, Orono, and earned a degree in 1983. With that, it is my distinct pleasure to hand the floor over to Glenn Foster. Glenn, the floor is yours. Please take it away. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ernie. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to everybody and share our experience in the expense automation. Just a little bit about Zoll Medical Corporation. We develop and market medical devices for emergency care, defibrillators, monitors, CPR technology, data management, and therapeutic temperature management. And we provide the products to treat resuscitation and acute critical care. We are a global company with multiple divisions, very autonomous divisions, decentralized control, and in the international world, we actually have about 100 people, 100 employees now using our automated expense program, but we have another 150 people internationally that are still in the process of adopting it. We do have employees all over the world, 18 different countries, as consultants, employees, manufacturers, reps, doing various sales, marketing, research, clinical research, marketing research, combination of subsidiaries, and distribution management everywhere. Prior to automating our process, we were on the spreadsheets, Excel, some faxes, and it was a very cumbersome process to obtain and review expense reports. In 2009, I had my international team start to switch to the use of Certify, and I'll get into that with the next couple of slides. As I said, we had manual process with Excel. We used to have to tape receipts to a piece of paper behind the Excel printout and manually cross-reference the receipt to the expense item on the report itself so that the AP processors could match the receipt to the expense item, especially when the currencies are involved. Employees submitted reports quarterly, sometimes less frequently than that, because it was such a cumbersome process of completing the expense report. I know for myself, the last thing I didn't like about a business trip was I still had several hours of work to do my expense report once I got home. Our data, we use Oracle for our ERP system, and the data was manually entered into Oracle. Very little reporting capabilities on that process. We did have some reporting out of Oracle, but not a lot of detailed reporting on the expense analysis that Bob spoke about in the previous slides. And we were spending $25, $30 per person per expense report to ship those expense reports with the receipts to either the manager or to the corporate headquarters here for processing. When we switched to Certify, here's an example of my very first experience with one of my managers in Latin America. He was a person that was very slow to submit his expense reports because it was such a cumbersome process to create the report, get it to the manager for approval, and then send it here to the corporate headquarters to be further reviewed, approved, and paid. And because there was usually 1, 2, 3 months of receipts in a package, it was a big pile that would show up at somebody's desk. And so that pile would always get shoved to the side of the desk, and it just took a while for the manager to get to it to approve and then for it to get processed. So I convinced this person to be one of my first of the team that I had try and implement the system, Certify, and his first experience was he did the expense report online using the receipts he had captured using his mobile device, and then he submitted the expense report at 6 p.m. on a Monday, and that report came to me for approval. I was just shutting down my computer to head home, and I shut my computer off, drove home, and then that was on my mind, so I logged back in, very quickly reviewed and approved his expense report remotely from home, and the manager got emails of the approval process, and by noon the next day, a wire had been sent to him to reimburse him. And so he was extremely impressed, and I got the following email quote from, note from him saying, "This is amazing. I sent the reports yesterday, and today I received the payment. I like the new system." So he was an instant convert and was one of my prime drivers in helping to spread the usage throughout the rest of the international team. when we went through our selection process to try to determine what we wanted to do for expense reporting, we went through and analyzed many different systems and solutions that are out there. We wanted something other than Excel. We wanted something easy to set up, plug and play. Web-based was going to be that type of tool that would help us the most given our geographic layout. And I needed something that was easy to use with no real formal training required. I was interested in what really attracted me in the Certify system is there was no extensive contract or upfront investment. There was really no commitment. I just had to start using the system and move forward. The international capabilities are very helpful with the different currencies, the languages, all the different languages are available, and the reporting, like I said, reporting of the expenses was another criteria. When we finally ended up selecting and going with Certify back in '09, the implementation was a breeze. There was very little training required. I created a PDF file of screenshots, actually it was provided by Certify, and then we added our own information to it, and we would email that to new employees as they either joined the company or started to use the system, and they were easy, it was very easy for them to figure out how to use it. It was just very intuitive. We received minimal pushback from the employees on the implementation. I actually surprisingly got pushback from one employee that I didn't expect. So what I did is I selected a handful of team members that were technology savvy and would be my champions to help spread the information on how easy this was to use. And this one employee I chose to do that refused to use the new system. And he was my gadget guy. He had every electronic gadget in the world, everything new and exciting software. He was the guy that had it. So I thought he was going to be one of my biggest champions on implementing this and spreading the word. And he just refused to use it, refused to use it, refused to use it. I finally met up with him. I said, Jack, what's going on? I thought you would love this. He said, well, my wife does my expense reports, and she loves the paper and the Excel format, so I can't convince her to switch. The results of our automation, we are saving over $10,000 annually in shipping costs alone, just in getting all of our expense reports from our team members here to the corporate headquarters or to their managers for approval and then to the corporate headquarters for processing. We have eliminated a lot of the spreadsheet use and lost receipts. The mobile app capture of the receipts real time is just very beneficial. When I travel and I pay for something with a receipt, sometimes I stick it in my wallet, sometimes I stick it in my briefcase, sometimes there's no receipt, and as time goes by, you forget about those items. But with the mobile app, if you're sitting on a bus ride or a train connecting to the airport, you can just quickly enter the item or take a picture of the receipt. It's very, very easy that way to keep track of all your items. The frequency of reports have increased to from quarterly or less to weekly or monthly. It takes no time now for anybody to create a report. The Certify's new report executive is fantastic. It just produces my report for me, tells me it's ready, and I can then approve it, review it, and forward it for approval. It just it gets faster reimbursement for everyone, reduces everyone's time, and everybody is back to their normal business, and they get their lives back. They can be more productive on other things. So that's kind of some of our experience with Certify in the system, and be happy to answer any questions if there are any. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Glenn, for that great content. Next question I will direct to Glenn. Glenn, can you share with us how your cloud-based system communicates with your other systems and what efficiencies that might have given you?
Yeah, we have an automatic interface from our system to our Oracle database. So each, I believe, our AP team does this interface daily when they process expense reports. At the end of each day, they will just automatically kick off a download that then goes and posts to the GL directly. Just no key punching involved. It was a pretty quick process to set up the interface, and even easier to train the team how to use it.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Glenn, I'd like to direct another question your way. As far as the international aspect of the application, can you speak to how the system handles the different currencies and the exchange rates and so forth?
Sure. You set your user profile to your home currency, and then you check off on your profile the ability to process expenses or incur expenses in other currencies, and then what the system will do, it will pull the exchange rate for those currencies on the date of the transaction. You can also then go and edit the line and add a transaction fee for a foreign currency fee that may be charged by your bank or credit card. We've developed several different ways of doing this. Some folks like to manually put in the exact dollar amount from their credit card. We can interface and download that from the credit card or type it in manually. There's all sorts of ways to do that, and they all seem to work well and are easy to review depending on the style of each of the employees.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Glenn. Next question I'd like to direct to Bob. Can you share with us a few of the most common internal gaps that companies seem to have in terms of both defining and enforcing their T&E policies?
Yeah, that's a really broad question, and we see it in a lot of cases. I mean, even before a company might adopt a product like Certify, in the Excel spreadsheet, paper world, the truth of the matter is, when you get an expense report, if the employee's already spent their money on that expense, that airfare, that hotel, that rent-a-car, that meal, those miles, etc., it's really hard for a lot of companies, especially in the SMB space. It's really, really hard culturally for a company to say, Bob, I know you spent $72 on the meal with the client on that sales call last week, but our policy says it's $50, and I'm only going to give you $50, and the other $22 is it's your problem. That's really a very difficult thing for many SMB folks to do culturally with their employee base. And what happens is that the system becomes the cop, if you will, the police, right? The system is going to be the enforcer, where it says, hey, you do have a violation. Help me understand why you had a violation. Use one of the reason codes to tell us why that happened, right? So that there's more details around it. That's one of the key areas. I think another area is that, again, going back to the conversation I had earlier about the online travel booking, where people are in a travel environment that's unmanaged, where the traveler, the employee, can book travel as long as it's, quote, within policy, whatever that means for that company. And they go out on the web and they do their best they can to find that travel that's within policy. But anytime there's a change, anytime they want to get, in most cases now, all the airlines are charging extra to get a seat, to get a better seat, to check a bag, to have a meal, all those ancillary fees, that becomes a real challenge and a real gap for people to manage. How do you want to do it? What do you want to do? I mean, everyone's been in that situation where they need to get a seat and there's only one left and they have to pay $25 for it or $40 for it or whatever the fee is. You want your employee to be effective in their job, but you also want to maintain costs. So I think those are some of the gap areas that a lot of companies tend to fall into.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Next question I'd like to direct to Glenn. Glenn, you've been on a cloud-based system for over 3 years now. Can you speak to maybe a few of the most meaningful improvements that you've seen over the functionality in that time? And also kind of a related question, part B, do you have to do any preparation, and how do you manage any upgrades to the system that take place?
Sure. Well, I'll answer the second part first. I mean, the upgrades, managing and preparing for the upgrades is seamless to me. There's just, whenever I log in, there's new functionality that is there. So it's very seamless. I just don't really notice it until I either get a newsletter saying here's the new functionality, or I log in and there's some announcement when I get in there of something new. One of the best improvements that I've seen in the system we're using was the automatic report executive. I go in and I set how frequently I want to do expense reports, whether it's weekly, monthly, quarterly, or annually, and then just start loading, capturing my receipts into my wallet as I travel. I can at any time manually prepare my expense report, but if I don't get to it, then this report executive on the date that I select, whether it's the last day of the month or every Friday, will prepare my report for me and then email me saying it's ready to be reviewed, and I can review it. That has saved a tremendous amount of time. One of the real strengths of the system that I appreciate is the review capabilities. When we review people's expense reports, the receipts are in front of us, attached to the line item. When we're on the paper system, quite often we'd get the Excel spreadsheet emailed to us saying, here's my receipt, here's my expense report, the receipts, I'll send them later, or I'll give them to the accounting team later, and you don't necessarily have the receipt handy to review the expense, so you can't really do a proper review. And the other advantage of this cloud-based system is the documentation of my review. There's evidence of my review in the report itself. If I have a question on a line item, I type the question. The employee gets an email saying there's a question. They answer it. The reviewer gets an email later saying it's answered, and you can continue with your review. So it's the documentation of the workflow and the controls in place, and the automation of the report itself just saves us a lot of time.
Great. Thank you very much, Glenn. The next question I'll direct to Bob. In general, how long does it take to implement a system such as Certify? Are we talking days or weeks, or what does that typically take a company to get up and going?
Yeah, thanks for that question. It really depends, and everyone hates it when somebody says it depends, so I'll try to qualify that a bit. We have users who sign up at certify.com and literally can fill out a 7-question form and be live on the system instantly, and they can start configuring it in our self-service product literally in real time, on demand. We have some customers who say we need, a little bit of assistance to get the configuration done, but they're happy to do their own training and implementation efforts to roll it out to their company, and those folks can get going in sort of, a couple days, a week. And then we have our enterprise customers that say, listen, we are really going to need, Certify to do the bulk of the work, the integration work, the configuration work. We need to connect to our accounting systems and to our HR systems and to our corporate credit card, and then roll it out and train it, test it and train it and help us launch this. And those can be anywhere from 30 to 60 days in time frame. So it really does depend on how much the company is looking to do on their own versus how much the company is looking to have us as a vendor handle for them. We're happy to have a customer sign up and let them do it all themselves, or we can do it all for them, or anything in between.
Okay, great. Next question I will direct to Glenn. Glenn, in terms of getting your folks up and running across the system, especially across borders, what kind of time did it take you to train those employees, or was that self-serve on some level?
What I did was a self-serve. It was just by user desire, the speed of payment. My guy in Panama that was always late in getting expense reports in, he wanted his money faster. So I selected a group of a dozen or so folks across the world that I thought were going to be early adopters, and got them up and running on it in literally in hours. It took me maybe a day and a half of not full-time but just part-time to set up the expense categories and get my criteria set up, and then create the 10 or 12 users and then set them loose. And you give them the PDF screen prints of how it worked, and then they just started using it. So we started in a little small step, and then our international team gets together every quarter for a business review. So I'd have them, the folks that were starting to use the system, share their experience with it with the rest of the room and explain to them the benefits they were seeing of the ease of use and how fast their reimbursements were, and it just snowballed from there. So I just started in a small step, and then it just snowballed. And my international team has been using it since '09, and this past year, our North America team jumped on and started using it. That was a little more of a bigger bang rollout with another 500 or so employees, and that took about a month to get them all trained. We went through some more formal training for them because it was such a big group. But we just started in baby steps.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Glenn. Next question I'll direct to Robert. Robert, can you offer us some more color or put a point onto around how technology allows companies to better enforce expense policies and reduce overall T&E spend?
Yep. So the two areas are pre-spend and post-spend. So before spend, using travel tools like certified travel, so that you're really requiring your employees to book airfare, hotel, and rent-a-car, which is in compliance with the corporate travel policy. Not only can it be in compliance with it, but you can put stuff that says, don't allow an employee to book an airfare over X dollars, or really more pertinent, don't allow an employee to book more than $100 over the cheapest fare, or X dollars, right? $100 to $150 over the cheapest fare, where they have to book X number of days in advance, 7 days in advance, 14 days in advance, etc. And by doing that, you're getting the best travel rates. You're also able to use negotiated rates. So if you have if you're doing 500 room nights, you can book that and move it all to one or two vendors and try to get negotiated rates to cut down the cost so you're getting a preferred program. That's true with rental cars as well as hotels. And then after the fact, once you're getting expenses into the system, being able to automatically flag those expenses that are out of policy, that are over policy, requiring that the employee provides additional details around that. You can have multiple levels of approval. So you have a policy violation, it's going to their manager, but because it's a policy violation, it automatically triggers to go up another level. Or you can have a special rule. A special approval rule for any expense categories is another area. So you might see somebody in a home office environment trying to buy a new laptop and expense it, and that actually maybe has to go through your procurement team, so notifying them and making sure that the proper channels are used to acquire new supplies and new technology. All those are steps and ways that you can use to legitimately reduce the total spend in travel and expense.
Okay, great. Final question, to be mindful of our time in the Q&A. Bob, what's next in terms of the functionality relative to cloud-based T&E expense management application?
Yeah, well, where's the future going from here? The way we see it, one of the key drivers is the receipt. And it's still an issue. It's really almost hard to believe in today's world with all the technology that we have that we're still dealing with little pieces of paper that print out of the point-of-sale systems and all the various providers. I think the first real adopter of a paperless receipt has been Apple. If anyone on the call has ever purchased something from the Apple Store, they just efficiently ask you for your email and they send it to you and you're all set. But the next level of that is going to be a truly electronic receipt that's going to be able to be captured by mobile phones and mobile technology. So whether that's near-field communication or some other technology, that's certainly an area that we're watching very, very closely. As the point-of-sale systems become more and more advanced and have that kind of capability, we want to make sure that we're on the leading edge, capturing that opportunity to make sure that our travelers are able to truly get rid of the paper and have it become a certified receipt, a certified expense report that is fully electronic and fully automated.
Okay, thank you very much, Bob. With that, we'll conclude the Q&A session. And any unanswered questions, we'll coordinate the answers with our speakers. A big thank you to Bob and Glenn for their time and insights. They're clearly thought leaders and an excellent source on today's topics. Note that in the post-webinar survey we prompted to take right after we conclude, you have the opportunity to express your interest in being connected with today's speakers with just a few mouse clicks. I'd like to thank again today's sponsor, Certify, and finally a big thank you to the audience for your valuable time. We hope to see you again soon at a Performative event or online at www.performative.com. Make the rest of your day great, everyone. Thank you.